Hi, and welcome. Thanks for joining me today as we go through our devotional. Today's devotional is going to be on Acts 8, verses 4 through 8. And before we jump into Scripture, I want to ask you a question. The question is, what specifically did God use to ensure the spread of the gospel? So as you process that, we're going to jump into Scripture. Chapter 8, verse 4 says, "Now those who were scattered went about preaching the word." So the first thing is, those who were scattered, why were they scattered? Well, in the beginning of chapter 8, we see that Saul is persecuting the church. As a matter of fact, if you look at verse 3, it says, "But Saul was ravaging the church." So there was a passion that Saul had at the time when he was persecuting the church. So because of that, the word that was being preached in Jerusalem is now being sounded everywhere. So the answer to the question is, what did God use to ensure the spread of the gospel? It's persecution. That's what he used. And now the scattering abroad of the faithful is being used to bring many into the faith. So let's go to verse 5. Verse 5 says, "Philip went down to the city of Samaria and proclaimed to them the Christ." Now remember, who is Philip? Well, Philip was introduced to us in Acts chapter 6, and he was so when there was a complaint about the Hellenistic Jews. Their widows were being overlooked in the distribution of food. And so the apostles didn't want to be taken away from the study of the word, appointed 7 men to help. Now, it's important to understand, when I say Hellenistic Jew, do you know what that is? Because you're going to see it in Acts. Just to give you a quick background, we had basically at the time 2 groups. You had the Hebraic Jews and the Hellenistic Jews. Now, the Hebraic Jews were those that remained in Judea near Jerusalem. They used the Hebrew language, and they were called Hebrews. They prided themselves on the fact that they lived in the land of the patriarchs and they spoke the language of their fathers. Now, Hellenistic Jews were those that were dispersed or scattered amongst the Gentiles. So because they were dispersed, scattered amongst the Gentiles, they spoke the Greek language. As a matter of fact, some would say they even adopted the Greek culture. And they read the Old Testament, but they read the Greek translation of that, which is called the Septuagint. So there was tension between these 2 groups. You had ones who were the Hebrews. They saw themselves as undefiled, and those who were Jewish but had been mixed in with the Gentiles. And if we're going to be honest, there was a bit of some discrimination there, the way that they looked down on them a bit. And some would say that was one of the reasons why the widows were being overlooked. So Philip, he is actually the first missionary named in Scripture. We see that he's going and preaching the word after they've been scattered because of Saul's persecution. He's one of the first in Scripture to be a missionary, and he's the first to be called an evangelist. In Acts 21:8, it says he was an evangelist. First one to be called that. So as we've gone through these devotionals, persecution has been a pretty consistent theme, right? We've talked about that consistently, and we see that here as well. God is using persecution to spread his gospel. And we also talked about in previous devotionals about how what cuts men to the heart, it's not our testimony, it is the gospel. So God's using persecution, he's using the proclamation of the gospel to bring many into the fold. So as you continue, hopefully to be bold in your proclamation of the gospel, I want to encourage you to keep preaching Christ crucified. And don't be surprised when you're persecuted. Like we talked about before, 2 Timothy 3:12, "Indeed, those who desire to live godly lives will be persecuted." Just continue to persevere, and hope you have a blessed day. God bless.